Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to all. We are streaming live from Halwan's Facebook page. Thank you for making the time to join our session tonight. Before we begin, I would like to ask the audience, is my voice clear? Is our video clear? You can comment down below. If you're watching from Facebook, you can comment down at the Facebook live comment section. If you're watching from YouTube, you can do the same on the comment section. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please share this video via WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all your social media platforms. We would be very happy if you could share with your circle, your cliques, our program tonight. Okay, regarding the topic for tonight, sejarah kita, our history, revisiting the transformation of Muslim education in the Philippines. We have heard a lot about Middle Eastern countries facing political and humanitarian challenges like Palestine, Syria, Afghanistan, but we seldom discuss or read news about our neighbor, not far from Malaysia in Southeast Asia, that is the Philippines, particularly about the homegrown Muslims there. Islamic teachings in the Philippines, despite being a secular country, have nourished through da'wah efforts. However, they are viewed as unparalleled with the visions and missions of the country. So tonight, we will be learning more about this topic, sejarah kita, revisiting the transformation of Muslim education in the Philippines from our invited guest, Dr. Ali Zaman Gamon. A little bit of introduction, profile for him is Dr. Ali Zaman grew up in Melalui city and received his college education in the Philippines at Mindanao State University. He is a holder of Doctor of Philosophy in Islam and Other Civilizations from ISTAT IIUM 2014, Master of Islamic Civilization, ISTAT IIUM 2001, and also Bachelors of Human Sciences in Sociology and Anthropology, also from IIUM. He taught at the Center for Foundation Studies, IIUM, and is currently an assistant professor at the Kuliah of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences, Department of Fundamental and Interdisciplinary Studies. Welcome, Dr. Ali Zaman. Are you feeling okay tonight?
Alhamdulillah.
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 May Allah bless our session for tonight.
Inshallah.
I would like to caution the audience. Tonight's program will be a bit academic, but we will try and make our best to make it more simple for the public to understand. Okay, let us go on with the session. I would like to also remind the audience, if you have any questions, you can comment in the comment section below, and we will address them once we reach the Q&A session at the end of the program. Okay. Dr. Ali Zaman.
Yes, sir.
Reading from the lens of the history of the Malay-Indonesian world and sejarah Melayu, it is an established historical fact that Islamization in the Philippines is intimately linked with Islam in the Malay world. The contribution of Malaysia to the Muslims in the Philippines has continued until recently. The success of the ratification of Bangsa Moro organic law, and the appointment of members into the Bangsa Moro Transition Authority. Maybe you can enlighten us about the recent contributions of Malays or Malaysia in the development of Muslim communities in the Philippines. Doctor.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. First and foremost, I would like to express my utmost gratitude to all officials of Haluan, Pertubuhan Himpunan Lepasan Institusi Pendidikan Malaysia, especially Brother Abu Bakar bin Muhammad Siddiq, the producer of Sejarah Kami, Sejarah Kami segment, for inviting me in this auspicious program with a noble objective of creating an awareness about the relevance of history of the Malays in the region. It is an historical fact that Islamization in the Philippines is intimately linked or related to Islam in the Malay world. The efforts of the Muslim intellectuals in the Malay world in reforming and galvanizing the theory and practices of Islam and its impact on various Islamic institutions and the development of Islamic culture had a profound influence on the Muslim communities in the Philippines. The epistemological foundation or the foundation of Islamic worldview, which is Tawheed, and the various classification of knowledge as it was popularized by Muslim scholars in the region, have been instrumental in molding the frameworks of Muslim intellectuals in the Philippines. The culture of disseminating or imparting knowledge, education, or Islamic education was developed in the form of discourse, like for example, Usra, Halaka, the master-disciple relationship, and other ways of imparting the knowledge of the Quran and Hadith. The various Islamic centers were responsible for intensifying the scientific culture in which the Quran, the Sunnah, the intellect, knowledge, fiqh, innovation, and creativity are integrated into the social life in a very unique manner, and thus it shaped the socio-political condition of the people in the region. Therefore, the highly intellectual and rationalistic approaches that are manifested in the social structure were responsible of revolutionizing the minds of the Malays as well as the Muslims in the Philippines. It eventually transformed their views on the concept of God, being, existence, the concept of time, the concept of religion, the concept of man and the self. Knowing the fact that before the coming of Islam in this region, Buddhism and Hinduism were deeply established in our culture, in our society. Now, there were few groups of Muslim intellectuals who were directly or indirectly involved in the various processes of reforming Islamic institutions. And this group of people are very important to be understood, the nature of their contribution in the Islamization process in the region. Now, because the way I understand this is that if we fail to understand their contribution, then it may lead to the distortion of the history of Islam in the region. Now, who are these people? Who are these intellectuals? So I refer that this group of intellectuals that I am going to mention are the Bangsamoros, the ulama, the intellectuals, where many of the non-Muslim historians had fabricated their contributions, and I think it is very, very timely for us in this discourse to at least to give a justice to the past history of those individuals who had contributed immensely in the Islamization process in the region. Now, number one, there are those who deal with matters of religious doctrines, those who deal with the production of revivalist literatures, both in the traditional sense of repacking old texts for new inspiration and seeking new converts to enlarge the Muslim communities. Those who produce special studies of examination and analysis are generally described as academics. But again, the group includes maybe some of them who are not necessarily connected with the institution of learning. Those are whose aim in writing, for example, or writing or to understand and to reconcile religious principles with the functioning of the society. It was through these efforts of this group of Muslim intellectuals that issues concerning Islamic identity, issues concerning the culture, religion, and peace, the Islamic institutions are conceived from the context of Islamic tradition. The relatively new ideas and thought were brought by the ulama and missionary from the Arab world, the Malay Indonesian world, and the influx of local graduates and their interactions or the cultural interaction or intellectual interaction with various organizations abroad had also contributed to the cultural, religious transformation of Muslim communities in the Philippines. There is no doubt, of course, that the contribution of Malaysia to the Muslim in the Philippines has continued until recently. Like, for example, the success of the ratification of the Bangsamoro Organic Law and the appointment of members into the Bangsamoro Translation Authority. And until now, we are not so certain what is the future of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in the Philippines. And I believed that directly or indirectly, our brothers in Malaysia have something to do, or maybe they have direct contribution towards the success of the ongoing process in the development of the autonomous region in the Philippines. Thank you.
So, is it correct to mention that the establishment of IUM and ISTEC are very important to the Philippines? And
certainly, of course, if I may say that one of the members of the parliament in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is a graduate of ISTEC, and another member of the parliament is a graduate of IUM. So mentioning these two, you can already sense that IIM have produced a few individuals who are contributing something to do with the development of knowledge, the development of the culture of knowledge in the Philippines.
Being an IIM graduate myself, I am very proud to hear this development, which I didn't know before. Okay, moving on, Dr. Ali Zaman.
Yes.
Maybe a short explanation about who are the Moros or Bangsamoro in the history of the Philippines, which particular epoch or a particular period in the history of Malay Indonesian world that had immensely shaped the worldview of Bangsa Moro, Doctor?
Okay, thank you. That is a very looking at from historical point of view, and to give justice to that question, I would say 1 hour is not it will not suffice. But anyway, there are a few terms in order to understand Muslim in the Philippines. Terms like Mindanao, the Moros or the Bangsa Moro must be understood. Okay, we know that it is a perception. It is a perception that most of the Muslim who are the Moros or the Bangsa Moro are residing in Mindanao, but that was before. But because of the so-called interactions, globalizations, and so on and so forth, then Muslims are scattered all over the archipelago. Now, the Mindanao is the second largest island in the Philippines after Luzon, which is the seventh most populous island in the world. If you go to to Manila, for example, I think Manila itself is consisting of the entire population of Malaysia. Yes, it's a very condensed, packed city. Okay, who are the Bangsa Moros? Bangsa Moro, the Bangsa Moro is derived from 2 words, which is actually a Malay word. Bangsa refers to the race or nation, and the Moros refers to the Muslims, whom the Spaniards call the Moors, whom they have encountered for several hundred years. And because of the established animosity between the two, then they had established that kind of negative perceptions of the Muslims in the southern Philippines who had encountered, resisted their force. Now, basically, the Bangsa Moro refers to the 13 cultural Muslim minorities who are spread in the different parts of the Bangsa Moro Autonomous Region. For your information, for those who do not know the fact that not the whole Mindanao belongs to the Muslim. That was before, let us say, before the migrants, the resettlement program of the government, until finally Muslims in the Philippines become minorities. Now, the contemporary usage of the term Bangsa Moro refers to Islamized inhabitants of Mindanao, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, and so on and so forth. Now, what is very important to this question is that the new ideas brought by the Moro, the worldview brought by the Moros was considered less threatening than Christianity, which was brought later by the Spaniards in the late 16th century. And what seems to be very interesting to note is the advanced Islamic knowledge taken as a model by various learning institutions in the Malay Indonesian world, and the farsightedness of the da'wah approaches adopted by the Moros, the local adat, and the practices were gradually integrated into the mainstream socio-political system. And because of that harmonious, let us say, integration, not the assimilation process, then it reduced the tension between the locals as well and the Muslims or the new established religion. Now, that kind of phenomenon, it shows that the largest non-Christian minority are the Muslim in the South. There are no accurate figures when it comes to the population of the Muslim in the Philippines, because it is estimated around, shall I say, around 10 million out of 110 million total population of the country. And there are many reasons why there is an inaccuracy of the government statistical data. And one of the reasons, some argued that they want to show that Muslims in the Philippines are not significant minorities. But we cannot deny the fact that wherever you go in the country, you will find Muslims. So that shows that Muslims is not only around 6% out of the total population, but it could be more than 10%, okay? That is the thing. Now, looking at answering to the questions to what particular aspect that had impacted the socio-cultural structure of the Muslims in the Philippines prior to the coming of the colonizers. So I may look at, for example, shall I say, the Islamic law and education system have thus penetrated and gained ground in the Philippines before the Spanish and American conquest. That cannot be denied. The different Muslim ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines have followed the traditional educational system widely practiced in the neighboring countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and so on, and have kept a great deal of the customary practices, customary laws, and applied themselves in varying intensities the person and the family rules of Islamic law as expressed in the Shafi'i school. So we can say that Philippines is also following the Shafi'i legal system, and prior to the influx of the Salafis theological influence, Philippines adhered to the so-called Asharite theological school. Now, after the Philippines was proclaimed as a republic, the Muslim in the Philippines were forced to comply with the Christian notions of civil and personal laws. And this is the main reason why there was a kind of decades of conflict between the two cultural groups. Now, because of that, for example, the educational philosophies of life had been remolded or refashioned in accordance with secularism. Now, these new laws and educational system were ignored by the majority. What I'm referring here is the system, the Islamic system, were ignored by the majority. I mean, the majority of the Muslim who continue to structure their societal needs in accordance with the teaching and objectives of Islam. So this act of violation by the majority of the Muslims in the Philippines can be understood in the contemporary sociological terminology as a counterculture that separated millions of people and the rest of populace regarding retarding the birth of the nation. Okay, something like that.
Thank you for the comprehensive
yeah,
answer.
I'm trying to compress everything because I know to give justice to it is really very challenging. So we will compact some of the informations, and as much as possible, we relate from one point to another point. Okay, let's proceed.
Okay. The next question would be, given the influence of secularism we often encounter in many of the writings on history of Muslim education, that Western values and traditions have been regarded as the criteria in interpreting social phenomena. We would like to know how the Philippines Muslim intellectuals have responded to the problem of contemporary knowledge, particularly their collective initiatives towards the promotion of cultural and civilizational convergence between Islamic and Western education as the ultimate panacea or solution to the decades of unresolved conflicts between Islam and Christianity in the Philippines. Doctor.
Thank you for asking that very interesting questions that would lead us or give us an intellectual window to really understand what has been what really happened in the history of Islam in the Philippines for the past few decades. Now, to look at that, we know that throughout the history of Islam in the Philippines, the revival of Muslim education stands as an epitome for every Muslim society, and the Muslim in the Philippines are not an exemption. The set of principles and methods laid by the Quran and Sunnah are meant to rejuvenate, the intellect, the knowledge, jurisprudence or fiqh, innovation, and creativity to meet the demands of the given time and space, or to meet the demands of a particular society. Now, reflecting on what really happened between the conflict between the Muslim and the Christian majority for the past few decades, bridging the socio-cultural gap is an issue. This is actually the point, bridging the socio-cultural gap where education plays an important role. Now, it is really a big challenge. So a holistic approach to Muslim history in the Philippines requires an objective orientation for the recognition of Islamic ideas and advocacies, particularly the responses of Muslim intellectuals towards the reduction of the impactful tension between Islamic and secular approaches to reform. Because we must understand that from the very inception, Islam promotes harmony. Islam promotes coexistence. Islam promotes cultural convergence and civilizational interactions. Okay, so therefore it is pertinent that the relevance of Islamic concept of social change should be given due recognition in the national system to attain more enduring and lasting peace in the country. So we are hoping that the present Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in the country will be given a chance so that the concept of Muslim governance can be realized within a given time. Now, there is no doubt that, as I said, Muslim intellectuals in the Philippines had played an important role in the overall development of Islam in the country. They have unwaveringly or untiringly responded to the challenges of modernity and the changing times. So, you know, modernity here refers to the challenges of, for example, Western values, Western worldview, philosophy, and so on and so forth. So Muslim intellectuals have been relatively successful in the gradual development of Islamic knowledge and culture. Their efforts have broadened the Muslim and non-Muslim perspectives on Islamic teachings and ideas of social reform. That is the reason why, you know, after the failure of the autonomous region in autonomous region, the ERMM. So the Bangsamoro BRMM has been conceptualized, and the contribution of the Muslim intellectuals, like for example, the rule of one of the ministers in the autonomous region, and as well as the one minister from secretary from the Office of National Commission for Muslim Filipino Affairs, for example. both of them had contributed towards introducing concepts of governance and so on, governance, education, democracy, and so on and so forth. Okay, then therefore the Islamic concept of peace has finally been heard in the houses of the Congress and Senate. Okay, since the establishment of the Republic, secular politics have indeed put an indelible mark on the history of Islamic institutions in the Philippines. In response to it, a perspective of social integration was prioritized in research on the social position of Islamic institutions. However, the overwhelming reference of many policymakers to the socio-political norms of governing Christian elites. I'm referring to the influence of the Christian elites from the Manila and their exclusivist patron-client relationship have indeed challenged many aspects of Muslim culture and tradition, particularly when it comes to the legal institution and the educational institution. So this challenge created by, as I said, the elites of the North, the people of the North. So this challenge is quite apparent in the case of Islamic reforms in the Philippines. The elites' influence on what is to be, in the national system is evident in the various laws that have been promulgated since the inception of the Republic. This approach would definitely accentuate further disagreements in the struggle to free, for instance, disagreements between the people of different cultures and religions. The government policy makers are still engaged in the struggle to free themselves from the current and new waves of intellectual domination of the ruling groups. So this is actually the big problem that we have to handle because of the disagreements, widening disagreements between the minority and the majority because of a particular approach. So this led to the birth of minority dominant group approach to the discourse of identity and education. So this will really happen because if we compare it with Malaysian perspective, you have a significant Indian minorities and Chinese minorities. But what is the minority dominant group approach? Okay, is not applied here as it has been applied in the country, in the Philippines. So meanwhile, the ideology behind the concept of assimilation, absorption, or integration exhibits the superiority of the dominant group over the minorities. So this is actually the issue. Muslim communities remained unassimilated into the national system, face marginalization in many aspects. Okay, and especially in the previous government, now during the time of starting from Arroyo, but definitely not in the case of Joseph Estrada, because Joseph Estrada he created a chaos. All the good legacies of the previous governments, he had put it into a total destruction. So this particular precedent is actually, I feel, as a citizen of the country, I would say I feel not happy with him. anyway, we have to understand him because of his background as an actor. most probably he was dreaming that he's still acting in one of his shows. So what happened to the Philippines during his time, that was a really very challenging scenario that Muslims and many of the Filipinos will never forget. Now, the Philippine political climates have overwhelmingly strategized the national discourse on multiculturalism by using culture as a means to solve social and political inequalities. It is viewed that the Philippines, as a democratic society, could put to an end the problem of integration only via shared national culture. Muslim intellectuals are consciously aware of the implication of the government discourse on cultural diversity and politics of recognition in relation with the Muslim minorities in the country. The discourse of multiculturalism, as it develops in due course of time, turns to be an advocate of non-tolerant policy, particularly, as I said, in the administration of Joseph Estrada, as the entire system undermined the importance of mutual recognition and integration between the Muslims and the non-Muslim. Such government advocacy eventually leads to the so-called Filipinization, Filipinization, not Islamization, but Filipinization of the entire Philippine society. The tradition and the cultural roots of the Muslim in the Philippines become radicalized as political programs popularize the society. Okay. Thank you, Brother Amin.
Okay.
I hope I have done something on that, and you are now floating somewhere.
There's a comment here that says that I have to smile more in that section. Because maybe because I'm so serious in listening to your explanation, trying to understand. So I'm trying to smile now.
Okay, I hope I am not bringing the class into a philosophical class.
Maybe we are in a philosophical class right now. Just kidding.
This is the problem. Intellectual historians will talk about concepts that shapes the social structure, rather than
we cannot stray away from the discussion, the intellectual discussion, because we have to address it anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We are halfway through the session.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. And the next question is very important. Okay, the Philippine government has crafted various policies for the development of Islamic institutions and the Muslim communities at large. How would you assess the various reforms which were introduced by the government to end the decades of conflict in Mindanao? What are the implications of those programs to the development of Muslim education in the Philippines, Doctor?
Okay, in my previous discussion, basically I have provided a kind of background to the answer to our question number 4, because you see, in the Muslim world, the 1970s plays a very important role in or we call it is the turning point of Muslim history, the 1970s. And I'm very fortunate that I was born in that particular era. I was born in 1970s. So my birth, the year when I was born was a very significant history in the entire in the Muslim world. From 1970s onwards, Philippine intellectuals have been actively involved, as I mentioned before, in the various initiatives for the realization of a unified system that may imprint a meaningful social coexistence in the history of the Philippines. So you can see that from the very beginning, although they were described as revolutionary groups, but they were asking the government, and the way they were understood as rebels, rather than intellectuals, reformers, agents of social change. Okay, so the unified system, that is the main point why they were so actively involved in the whole process. Later on, I will mention a few important Muslim leaders who were actively involved in the entire process of Islamization and reform of Islamic institutions in the Philippines. So, okay, now such initiatives, actually, the initiatives are guided by the principle of the Filipino way of life, our culture, the Filipino personality, the Filipino language, the philosophy of the Filipinos' lives, and to be a true Filipino. This is actually when they conceptualize the different policies crafted by the succeeding government, they conceptualize it from these concepts. You see? So looking at from the word Filipino personality, Filipino language, philosophy of the Filipino lives, and so on. If you are minority, how do you feel? If you are Malay, well, how do you feel? That you are not represented in that particular reform, in that particular initiatives. When textbooks are written, you don't see your culture, you don't see your religion, you don't read about yourself, and it doesn't reflect, you don't feel that you are part and parcel of that reform. That is the issue that we have to understand, really, okay? Because to understand policies of the government, then we have to really contemplate and reflect on that dimension. Okay, it is apparent, however, that the appeal to regard all people as one, regardless of ethnicity or social class, has no strong impact in the deliberation of a unified social system, particularly in the field of law and education. You see, like, okay, they have given, for example, the Muslim personal laws in the Philippines, but until now, that particular set of personal law has not been codified. It doesn't serve really the legal needs of the Muslim in the Philippines. So it's okay, we have the Muslim personal law, but there is no development. Okay, I don't want to go through on that. Let me refer to some of the notes that I have prepared here. Okay, it is apparent, however, that as I mentioned here just now, I may say that it is quite disturbing that the epitome of true national life as experienced by the people of great civilization is obstructed or hindered by the preponderance of a materialistic approach within the system, and thus sweep away the urgent demand for social unity, brotherhood, and equality. What I'm referring here is because of the prevalence of the so-called materialistic philosophy of life, and eventually anything related to religious aspect are being marginalized, and that is actually the big issue. Okay. Now, the Commission on National Integration is mandated by the Philippine Constitution to give a sense of belongingness to the cultural minorities. You see here, the Commission on the government created a Commission on National Integration. Why is it? To give a sense of belongingness to the cultural minorities, particularly the Muslims. Okay. So it guarantees the freedom of both majority and minority from hatred bigotry, prejudice, intolerance from any system of thought that may favor partial interest detrimental to the vision of achieving one nation. Okay, so this is the point that I'm now moving on. Let us say pushing, going to the, so let's say, the contribution of few individuals. There are many Muslim intellectuals, leaders. We don't have much time to bring them all here to mention them, but I want to mention one very important charismatic Muslim leaders who had contributed towards the development of Muslim education in the Philippines by the name Senator Domuco Alonto, the first Muslim representative to the House of the Senate in the Philippines. And he argued, okay, that the type of education formulated by the government policymakers was actually a debacle in the Muslim areas, okay, and to some extent worsened the problem of the so-called problem or conflict between the two. So what I'm trying to say here is that he argued, he managed to convince the government that what you are offering to the Muslim will create disagreements, will create a kind of cultural gap, and there is a need to reflect and contemplate and come up with a new strategy in order to address the problem. And the Mindanao State University was created out of that. He was the father, he was the author of Mindanao State University. And to make it very brief, what is really the contribution of Mindanao State University? For your information, Mindanao State University consists of 11 campuses in the different parts of the armed region. And what is the rule of Mindanao State University? Later on, I'm going to touch on the reform of education after this. So what I can say here is that few institutions, like, for example, the Philippine government come up with a policy of attraction, reconciliation, rehabilitation. They come up with the National Commission of Muslim Filipinos, that is to create and preserve Islamic culture, heritage. The government come up with the Muslim personal laws, and this personal Muslim, we call it the Code of Muslim Personal Laws. The regional autonomy was recognized in 1987, and the Constitution provides a different judicial system to the autonomous government. Okay, and at the same time, the Organic Act provides administration of justice. The Organic Act mandates the Sharia appellate courts, and at the same time, the introductions of different legal and educational reform, and what else? And of course, very recently, in October 15, 2012, the framework agreement of the Bangsamoro was what they call this, was been conceptualized and later on been accepted and signed into the law by the government. And this is actually the replacement of the so-called failed government experiments in Mindanao. The BARMM is the replacement of the failed government experiment in Mindanao. So why failed experiment in Mindanao? You might be saying that you become a kind of experiments of the government. But anyway, we gave justice to them. There were many members of the Congress and the Parliament who had immensely contributed into the gradual transformation of the Muslim in the Philippines. So we have to acknowledge that fact. Okay.
Maybe we need to make another session about how it became a failed experiment
Yes, that's
That
very
is
interesting
that's
how it becomes the experiment of the government, and I think I'm not going to touch here. Otherwise, we will be trapped somewhere, and we will not be able to finish our discussion today.
yeah. Okay. Okay, Doctor. To recap, you said that the government policies, it is implied that the government's development policies towards Muslims in the Philippines is concentrated on integrating them through education. You have also highlighted that despite the changeable politics in the Philippines, the Islamic education of the Muslim minority continues to improve. And you did mention that you were lucky to be born in the 1970s. Could you elaborate further the nature of educational reform that took place
Okay.
during that year?
Okay, thank you so much. This is actually the most important thing, and to describe them one by one. Even when it comes to the establishment of Mindanao State University, I would say I need one session. The establishment of the National Commission on National Integration, I need one session for that. And even when it comes to the creation of the Islamic Studies in the Mindanao State University and the Islamic Institute of Islamic Studies in the University of the Philippines in Diliman, believe me, we need an important session to really understand pertinent pressing issues on the establishment of those institutions created by the government as a response to the so-called problems of Muslim in the Philippines, as well as to revitalize educational institution, legal institution in the country, especially in the 1970s. Now, how to do this? Let me very briefly, brother, just want to mention a few things. As I said, point number one, the Commission on National Integration. See, looking at Malaysian context, you have the means of integrating the Chinese and the Indian into the mainstream, okay? Through education, through cultural aspects, and so on and so forth. But the Commission on National Integration, we call it CNI before, is meant to accelerate progress of Muslim politically, economically, to promote their incorporation into the nation's government and social system. Now, here to accelerate. Why accelerate? Because Muslims were backward. Muslims were behind. That is a kind of perception to me. You know, when you say you are behind academically, you are behind intellectually because of your education system, we can debate. We can debate on that. I can say that secularist group of intellectuals are also very behind because they themselves couldn't even understand themselves from that perspective. So it's a kind of assumption that the National Commission on National Integration is, they come up with that system because they are telling the Muslims, you are behind economically. Okay, fine. Because they have been marginalized for few decades. So economically speaking, definitely we are behind. Then the infrastructure of the society, we are behind. And because of that, national integration was created in order to make Muslims at par with the majority. Now, again, the Mindanao State University. I just want to mention three important points related to Mindanao State University. Number one, to perform the traditional function of the university, meaning to say Mindanao State University was established to not to forget the traditional function of the university, but what is the function of a university must be developed within the system. If others are offering engineering, then Mindanao State University must offer. But point number two is to help accelerate the programs of integration. This is the point. Mindanao State University is a mechanism, is an instrument by the government to integrate Muslim culturally into the mainstream system. Point number three. Point number two. And point number three is to provide trained manpower skills and technical knowledge for the economic development of Muslims in Mindanao, in Sulu, and Palawan region. Why Palawan region? You must understand, people of Malaysia, Palawan is a pahlawan. It is an island of the warriors. And who were the warriors in Palawan? They were the Malays. So that's why we call it Palawan, the island of the pahlawan. Island of the Pahlawan. Now, eventually, due to the migration of the people in the different parts of the country, then Muslims in that part of the archipelago become minorities. Okay, that is Mindanao State University. Another important thing is the establishment of King Faisal Center for Islamic, Arabic, and ASEAN Studies in the Mindanao State University. The center played a very important role, especially in promoting Arabic, Islamic studies, international relations at the same time. And the center also emphasized Islam, not only a part of the Philippine culture, but also a way of life. That's the most important thing, because prior to the establishment of King Faisal, maybe people in the Philippines understood Islam as just a religion, but the King Faisal Center was responsible of popularizing the mainstream narratives of Islam. And they offer very interesting programs like Bachelor of Arts in Islamic Studies, major in History, Jurisprudence, Bachelor of Science in Teaching Arabic, Bachelor of Science in International Relations, and a few more programs and so on. Another important institution which was created before in the Philippines is the MESU Sharia Center. MESU Sharia Center. Now, the center is under Mindanao State University, and it is established. The Sharia Center is to assess the college or the Kuliah or the Faculty of Law and the King Faisal Center in research, preparation and development of teaching reading materials for Sharia subjects. Okay, and there are a few more important contribution of the center, especially in the development of Islamic studies in the country. Then another important institution and that has played an important role in the development of Muslim education in the country is the Institute of Islamic Studies in the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Okay, somehow rather it is a bit related to the program of King Faisal Center for Islam and Arabic Studies, and the institute the institute provides both graduate and undergraduate courses on Islamic studies, and looking at the contribution when it comes to research, I would say graduates of the institute had contributed important research, not only in the field of law, but in different disciplines in Islamic studies. And recently, the collaboration of the Institute of Islamic Studies in UP with the International Islamic University and the International Institute of Islamic Thought based in Kuala Lumpur, I would say that may contribute towards the revitalization of the institute.
Okay. Are you okay, Doctor?
Let me drink. It's okay. Carry on.
Do you want to proceed with the questions, or you want me
Let's
to
proceed.
open
Let's
the
proceed
questions?
with the questions. We are almost done, I guess.
Okay, because we have many questions from on YouTube. In the comments, we have many questions.
Okay,
but we can.
We look at these two, maybe one or two questions from you. Then we finish and we proceed with the answers.
Okay, let me proceed with question 6, and then we open to Q&A. Okay.
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 If you have the last one about maybe I don't know your concern in the questions.
Maybe let's talk about the Bali Islam movement.
Okay.
We can do that. Okay. Okay. A simple question.
Okay.
The upsurge of rapid increase in conversion to Islam in the Philippines, particularly in the northern Philippines, has attracted many scholars across the globe, as well as NGOs, due to the particular narrative of Islam that attracted Christians to be converted into Islam. What is the correlation between the transformation of Muslim education in enhancing da'wah work, particularly in the case of Bali Islam movement in the Philippines?
Oh, thank you, brother Amin, asking a very recent question when it comes to a particular group of Muslim who are now contributing immensely in the Islamization process in the country. And being a student of Islam in the Philippines, I acknowledge their contribution. I would say we should support their initiatives because they have played an important role. The da'wah workers in the South, what the Balik Islam can do, I doubted that the da'wah workers in the South can do the same thing, because of few advantages that they have. And their advantage is the language, the education, the advancement of their education, and so on. So let me look at the evolution, just a brief evolution, a history of the evolution of this Balik Islam in the Philippines. Now, to begin with, we have to be aware of the fact that the purpose of education is to provide clarity of visions. We cannot deny what is the purpose of education. Why you want to go to the university? The reason is to have a clarity of vision, so that you know what you do. You can discern between right and wrong. That's the point, and that is the purpose of education. Now, understanding of social and natural realities cannot be fully grasped by intellect, which is independent from religion or revealed sciences. That's very clear. Therefore, religion provides man answers to his everyday questions and concerns. Secularism in the Philippines has been questioned by both Muslim and Christian communities due to its failure in many aspects in providing I would say a comprehensive answer to their questions. Okay, that we cannot deny that. In this era of Industrial Revolution 4.0, we are now or the globalization era. The dissemination of information, like for example, religious concepts, ideas, worldview, how it develops, how it operates, who influence it, and who are being influenced. Okay, now this is actually what is happening in this era. Now, it is interesting to note that those who associate themselves with the Balik Islam movement legitimize or base their claims on the early establishment of Islamic sultanates throughout the Philippines, which occurred prior to the arrival of the Spanish Catholicism in the 16th century. You see? So now, when you ask them, they are attributing, they are connecting themselves to the 16th century kind of identity. Okay, and what is that in the 16th century? See, Muslims in the Philippines were not Christians, they were Muslims. That's why anyone who converted to Islam, they call themselves as Balik Islam, revert to Islam, which means they return back to the previous religion. So
Balik Islam is not Malay word, or is it?
It's a Malay word. It's a Malay word. Balik. Balik means balik. Because in Philippines we pronounce ki, balik Islam. So in Malay, balik Islam. So balik. So
it is actually a Tagalog.
It's a Tagalog term.
Tagalog.
Actually, the influence of the Malay. Influence of the Malay. So that's the point. Balik Islam. Okay. Then what I am trying to say here is that they connected them their identity to the 16th century, particular history in Islam. Okay, so most of the movement founders are former Christian Filipinos who work as contractors in the Middle Eastern and Gulf countries, and who first encountered Islam while abroad. So meaning, when they were in the Philippines, they have not encountered Islam. Okay? And when they work in the Middle Eastern countries, especially starting from 1970s, then there was a kind of religious encounters, religious interactions. So that the kind of civilizational interaction is an important concept to be understood. Because in that interaction, education played a significant role. Because if the advanced people of the North are interacting with orang bodoh, sorry to say the word, people who are uncivilized. So therefore, the people of the North will not be attracted to the religion. But because of the nature of the interactions, they found something that they couldn't find it in their own respective localities. Like for example, hospitality, concept of justice, concept of love, concept of joy, all these universal concepts that they had a prior conception to it, then they found it among the Muslims. Because what is in their mind is Muslims are terrorists, Muslims are fanatics, Muslims are cannibals, and so on and so forth. But when they work in the Middle Eastern countries, then such kind of perception about Islam had been changed. So this is about education, advancement of their education. So because of the advancement of the education of the Muslim in the North, then they become gradually, eventually converted to Islam. Now, you might be asking, what are the reasons why they converted to Islam? Number one, point number one that I want to acknowledge is the historical legacy of Islam in the Philippines. The historical legacy of Islam in the Philippines. So they attach themselves to the history. Okay. Point number two, the colonial and post-colonial grievances from Spanish and American rule. These grievances. So they read the grievances until finally they know, they understand who is right. So that kind of grievances, they had corrected the misperception written in history. So this is called historical injustices done to the Muslims. So through that encounter, then the third one is the present day state-sponsored exportation of labor. A present day state-sponsored exportation of labor. So this is the point. More people in the Philippines were, given an opportunity to work outside and so on. Number four, the current transnational networks of Filipino migrants in diaspora. So there is a kind of transnational networks. These networks played an important role. So I think that this is the point. And to make it very, very short, I found one important research recently. One of the researchers asked one of the respondents, "Why did you convert to Islam?" And the answer is quite interesting for us. He said, "It is a true religion." Point number two. Point number two, I found the truth that satisfied my curiosity about my salvation. Secularism will not give you an answer for that. It makes my life so easy. It makes my life so easy. Materialism will make your life so complicated and so until finally you cannot handle. Okay? It explains the complex system of life. Because religion is a religion, culture, and civilization. I found peace, and I believe it is the complete way of life. In Islam, I found tranquility and perfect way of life, here and after. Here and after. Even the concept of eschatology, life after death, before they couldn't even grasp, they couldn't really understand it in their previous culture, religion. But when they engage in Islam, then they were provided a clear understanding on that. I found true and deep faith in Islam. So these are the answers, answers of some of the converts in Islam that we can really contemplate to what extent do we feel the same? If the Balik Islam felt those kind of answers, my question, do you feel the same?
I do.
Yes, Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you. The last question, maybe we can reserve some other days. But
we have 3 questions from the public.
Okay.
That are quite interesting. Maybe I would save my question towards the end, but I want to read the questions from the public. Can I do that?
How many more minutes do we have?
Actually, we are 10 minutes past 10:30. We are 10:43. But it's okay, right? But okay. I think I want to read the questions given by Brother Y Banun. I'm not sure whether he's Malaysian or not. Maybe he's Malaysian. Okay. Respected doctor, what we see now is more Filipinos, including in Luzon, are getting interested in Islam. The interests and reversions are said to be incrementally happening annually. But we also understand that the support systems for reverted Filipinos is very weak. Facilities as well as tutors are sometimes far and between. How would the Islamic leadership in the Philippines mitigate this void so that new Muslims there could be guided properly and not be denied of the true teaching of this religion?
Okay. Okay, let me really contemplate to answer your questions. I agree with you. I agree with you that especially when it comes to support system, the support system given to the da'wah workers in the Philippines, the failure of Islamic leadership in supporting da'wah works. Because I believe, and I'm very, very thankful, we are indebted to Halwan due to their active participation, involvement, their initiatives in the revitalizing, enhancing da'wah works in the Philippines. And I was also informed by Brother Jamil recently that the mosque in Davao that Halwan established played a very important role on that. Could you just imagine if Islamic leadership in the Philippines are doing the same thing what the Halwan are doing? So it will be, the defined purpose of da'wah works in the Philippines can be maximized, and definitely it will contribute to the so-called rapid number of conversion of Islam in the Philippines. So other religions might be questioning a group of NGOs why you are taking our people into your religion. But what is interesting is that the Philippine constitutions is enshrined by the concept of the separation of the church and the state. And because of this concept of separation of the church and the state, which means the public affairs, as long as it doesn't contradict to the constitution, you can do anything. You can do anything. So religion, whatever religious belief can be developed in the country. That is the reason why Islam is the most fastest growing religion in the country, because we are taking advantage of the democratic system of the country, where they don't question in a religion. You can practice your religious beliefs and customary practices and so on and so forth. And the government is not questioning. Now, let me reflect on how, and let me come up very, very fast. Number one, I think we need to assess the educational institution in the Barn region to instill the value of being mindful of the existence of mutual interest and interdependence between communities in the Philippines, Malaysia, due to the established historical legacy. So I think we need to assess the education. If you want to help, the da'wah work in the Philippines, assess the education. Okay, because if you assess the education, you will see what are the lacking part in the education. So if there are lacking part in the education, workers, the NGOs, the intellectuals can fill up, or can fill up the void, can fill up the gaps. Point number one. Number two is to collaborate with the BAM authorities to popularize Islamic form of governance. Okay, this is very important because why? Remember, da'wah works is aimed to create one vision, one ummah, one identity, one caring, one sharing community through da'wah activities, an exchange of best cultural practices by adapting the concept of lita'arafu, knowing each other. Okay, and again, because our discussion today is about revitalizing, transformation of Muslim education in the Philippines. So here, through a reform education, both BARM and Malaysia can collaborate in strengthening the principle of cooperation that guarantees the establishment of true spirit of brotherhood through da'wah activities. This is something because the hedonistic way of life, the materialistic way of life, eventually we become selfish, and we have forgotten the very purpose of our ummah, which is to strengthen the principle of da'wah and brotherhood. The da'wah in the Philippines, I think we need to produce holistic education for holistic personality. To upgrade the knowledge, the skills which are important, necessary to effectively respond to the current and future challenges of the ummah. So because if we cannot train the youth to be ready how to understand the problem and to come up with effective way of solving the problem, so what would happen to our da'wah? People will not be attracted to us because we are not making a change. We are not playing an important role in the society. So if we can transform the dawah, and people will see, look at this group of people, the Halwan Mosque in Davao. Why there are so many activities which are attracting the youth into the mosque? Why other mosques are not attracting the youth? There must be a problem with the system, the management of that mosque. So this is the important thing that we have to educate, and that is through the education. And lastly, this is the one who asked me to instill the spirit of accountability in the various da'wah organizations to serve the interest of religion, to serve the interest of the self, to serve the interest of the society, and to serve the interest of the civilization. Thank you. I hope I have answered the question.
I think you have, and also you have answered the question that I wanted to ask about the NGOs. You have answered two birds in one stone.
I encapsulated everything into it, right? Yeah. I think I can read you mine now.
Okay. There's a second question from the public. Okay. Do we still have time, the organizer? Continue, okay. Okay, the question is, based on what little that we know, poverty and deprivation of access to education and economic assistance are some of the major setbacks for most Muslims in the Philippines. Equity and equality to basic developmental tools are not too forthcoming. Perhaps economic transformation and education should be the main crux for the Muslim leadership in the Philippines to champion, especially for those in the rural areas as well as the urban poor. Your comments, please, Doctor.
Thank you so much for asking that very important question. This is another discourse that we have to address, especially on the economic aspect, economic dimension. We cannot deny the fact that the economic institution is very much highlighted in the knowledge system of Islam. In fact, the rukun of Islam, the third rukun, which is the zakat, the establishment of Islamic social financial institution. Now, arguing from the concept of zakat, just want to highlight on that. How can you be entitled to give a zakat? How can you be, shall I say, among the few who will be sharing his blessings given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the have-nots, to the needy? So this is actually the economic transformation. And the economic transformation would play a very important role. You cannot deny that. You don't have the means, you will not be able to enjoy many of the blessings given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. So you have to, and in fact, when it comes to the higher objectives of the Sharia, one of the things that Islam must protect is wealth. So if Islam is meant to protect the wealth, it means that Muslims should deduce Islamic principles for the enhancement of the economic system. In fact, the second caliph of Islam, Umar, had introduced a revolutionary concept when it comes to economic system. And those systems that he introduced until now, it is very significant. For example, when it comes to the management of the market, now you can look at it from the advancement of shopping complexes and so on and so forth. Okay, and how he introduced that. and how he get benefits from those kind of taxes, because he introduced the concept of tax in order that the state can become rich. So when in fact, when it comes to dawah, I want to reflect on this. Who are the one who supported and sponsored the wandering Sufis? You know, and most of the Sufis who were responsible of disseminating Islam in this part of the world were sponsored by philanthropists. So these philanthropists give the zakat and the sadaqah to the ulama, and the ulama who can easily spread Islam because they have the sponsors. So we need a backup, strong financial backup. International Islamic University is surviving until now because, number one, aside from the help of the government, we have the waqf system. We have the endowment system, and Amin knows that. How many hundreds of Muslim students in IIUM who enjoyed the support of endowment? So we produce hundreds and hundreds of scholars out of that zakat, out of the waqf, or we call it Islamic financial institution. Thank you.
Okay, there's one more question from the same brother. We in Malaysia are in awe of President Mr. Rodrigo Duterte. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Yeah.
Especially his efforts of political and economic reforms. He has conquered many milestones. He fights corruption like never before seen. How, in your opinion, are his views on Islam and Muslims in the Philippines?
Okay, we have to really give justice to this gentleman. If you are pro, then you can say many things about him. If you are against with his administration, then you have a very long list of criticism against him. But of course, it's not the purpose of this discourse to criticize others, because sometimes those criticisms are politically motivated. But we look at something that he had contributed positively to the Republic. Number one, no one can deny the fact that he worked very hard to crush the so-called the drug problems in the country. And you know how he was criticized by netizens, by human rights advocates, and so on. But anyway, he has done his best, but until finally he couldn't even stop them. The drugs, the business on drugs, no government in the world can stop it, not unless a part of our body is Islamized, and that is the heart. As long as the heart is adhering to the principle of materialism, the world will not solve the problem. This is the reality. Number two, the problem of corruption in the country. That corruption is a virus in the country established before the administration of Tetapi. So don't tell me within the few years of his administration, the disease, which is actually a terminal cancer, can be cured within a short period of time. We need a long process. Okay, long process. And I believe that he has introduced a few programs towards addressing this issue. And but at the same time, there were so many criticism. I mean, the critics of Duterte when it comes to addressing equity, equality, and so on and so forth. And the list is very long. The list is very, very long. And that's it.
Okay. We have talked about many things tonight, and I, for one, have learned a lot. Previously, I didn't know anything about the Philippines. Tonight, I know many many historical events that took part not far from our home. And I think a reminder to everyone, particularly Malaysians who are listening to this live, we need to know more about our neighbor. Not the literal neighbor of a house, but neighboring countries. But I'm sure that Malaysia as a country is trying its best to do the best in helping other countries, while it struggles to help its own country, its own people. Like, for example, the pandemic is hitting Malaysia very hard, and even the people here are very struggling to make ends meet.
And to add, brother Amin, we have not even touched the core of issues, actually, the most recent, which is actually the Marawi siege. And that is the most important thing we have to, but I intentionally did not touch the issue because we have to go to so many complicated issues related to Marawi siege. But what I can say in relation to our subject matter today is because of the failure of education. That siege took place because of radicalism, engagement of the youth on radical ideologies, because of the failure of leadership, the failure of family institution. These are all related to education, actually. So I believe that if those involved, the ISIS and Abu Sayyaf, had embraced the mainstream belief system of Islam, for sure they are not going to be engaged on those kind of activities. But because of weak understanding of their belief system, the culture, and the customary practice at the same time, so eventually it resulted to the so-called radicalism. So fortunately in Malaysia, what we can learn from Malaysia is that the government intelligence is very strong, the family system is well intact, the cooperation of the society when it comes to social problems, they inform the authority. But in the case of the Muslim Filipinos, in that particular Marawi city, the people there, they support, they protected the relatives because kinship is very strong. Until finally, many of them, although they were engaged in such kind of problems, but they were protected by the family institution and the system itself. So that is something that needs to be rectified. I think that's all, and thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
Waalaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali Zaman, for your input. Thank you. I pray that we will be Allah will shower His blessings to our country, to your country, to the Muslims all around the world. And regarding our discussion tonight, a fact that we have to take into context is that the Muslims in Philippines are 10 million, around 10 million, right?
Or more than 10 million,
right? More than 10 million. and the Muslims in Malaysia is around 19 million, or around nearly 20 million. So it's like not so much difference between the numbers. So that's why we have to help each other. If the government cannot, then NGOs have to help, like what Alhamdulillah Al-Halwan is doing a good job in building the mosque that you mentioned just now. And before we end our session tonight, I would like to announce that Halwan is organizing 2 competitions since we are still in the independence mood. So the competition is about video competition and poster design competition. So we will broadcast it on our Facebook page. Be sure to check it out. And with that, I thank you, Dr. Ali Zaman, again. Thank you. We will be having you next time, inshallah, maybe to talk in depth more about the topic.
Inshallah.
And with that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Salam.